welcome everybody. Good to see you guys back. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about tarot spreads. I'm probably going to cover, this is maybe optimistic, but I'm hoping to cover 4 different layouts. So this morning I'm going to buzz through 2. And what I want to do is try to give you layouts that are really appropriate for different kinds of situations. So this morning we're going to look at the traditional Celtic cross, although I have to tell you, I have a very different take on it in some ways than most people. And then we'll also be looking at a tarot spread that I developed over the years, and it's for relationships. So we'll be looking at that in the afternoon. Then we're going to probably do a Tree of Life spread, just because we spent so much time on the Tree of Life. It seemed like if I didn't do it, it would be really sad. And then if we get to it, we'll do another. So here's the thing. I want you to, if we can, I'd like to have you each do a spread. But we'll see if we have enough time to do that. And once again, you guys know I'm a rapid lecturer. So if you end up getting lost, just stick your hand up and interrupt me, because I can just charge on here. So let's begin by talking about the Celtic cross. Now, what I did is I gave you a couple handouts. These are cheat sheets to help you. So there should be one, you'll never see that with the camera, but which is the basic Celtic cross. I'm going to draw it on the board. So, and I'm going to say what's on the sheet. This covers you. This is the querent card. This crosses you. All right, I can't remember if I did above. Yeah, all right. This is above you. This is below you. This is behind you. This is before you. This is all on your handout. This is yourself, your house, hopes and fears, and outcome. Now, for the outcome, you might choose to have up to 3 cards. I usually don't do any more than 3. If you haven't gotten it by then, you just give it up, you know? And the way that I do that, this is just my personal way of doing that, is that if I don't get a trump, if I get a major arcana, you know, one of the trump cards, as number 10, I quit. That's enough for me. But if I don't, if I get a lesser arcana, and sometimes you get a lesser arcana, and boy, is that the perfect card. It's so clear to you, then quit. But if it's not like overwhelmingly resonating, I will often throw a second card and see if I get a trump. If I don't get a trump, I might throw a third. So those are your choices there. Now, before we actually look at this layout, let's talk about some general things that I want you guys to pay attention to. Because here's the real art. You know, you can even grab a book if you've forgotten, although we all know I would prefer you not. But if you need to, you can always look something up in a book. But the real art is, how do you put all those cards together, right? So here's the first thing you want to think about. You want to think about the distribution of the cards according to suits. So if you have a lot of one suit, like you do a spread and you look and you go, oh my gosh, look at all of those cups. Or, oh my gosh, look at all those pentacles. If you have a lot of one suit, it tells you kind of in a general sense, well, that's where the energy is in your client's life. So when somebody comes in and they say, oh, you know, I really want to, you know, do a thing about relationships. It's all about relationships for me right now, you know, and you throw the cards and you get a bunch of swords. Well, that's all about the mind and working out our internal, you know, intellectual structures, and it's not the best thing for relationships, right? So you might say, well, before, you know, Mr. Right or Mrs. Right or whatever is going to come along, there's some things we need to work on here. On the other hand, if somebody's interested in relationships and they say, you know, well, I just want to know what's going on in my life, but, you know, in general, I'm also particularly interested in relationships, and you throw your cards and you have a million cups, well, then you're going to go, oh, yeah, No wonder you're interested in relationships right now. You've got a lot of cards indicating emotional life, the emotional life. If, on the other hand, somebody is like coming in and again they're really interested in relationships and you get a ton of pentacles, well, that could go one of two ways. Pentacles do have to do, because they're earth, right? And earth has to do with, the home and one's physical stability. That could be about relationships, especially about committed relationships, but it's more likely about career, making money, So let's look at the four suits. Earth. Oh, Pentacles has to do with, again, Earth has to do with financial matters and stability in the home. It's about the building up of the physical structures of one's life. Cups, emotions, also one's inner life. Wands, activity, being involved in the outside world, being a mover and shaker. And then finally, Swords, which is more about the internal world of thought. It's about organizing our ideas, our life, and our reality, from the level of thought. So that's just a quick thing. When you throw the cards, kind of look. And if you have tons and tons of, swords, well, that tells you that there's a lot of energy in that area. If you throw the cards and you get a gazillion trumps, you get a reading and you've got like 6 or 7 trumps, or you have lots of trumps and court cards, kings, queens, and so on, then whoa, this is a big time in a person's life. So when that happens, the first thing I say before I even read the cards is I say, I got to tell you, this is a big moment in your life. You have a lot of energy coming in. So you want to really pay attention and focus in and work these energies, because this is a moment of crux. This is a moment when the big stuff is happening in your life. So you want to look at that. That's another matter of distribution. It's important to just think about that. The other thing that you want to think about, I said in our last class that I don't work with reversals. So when you're throwing the cards, if a card comes out upside down, just, put it upright, because we're going to look at whether or not things are more in their positive or their negative meaning according to context. So and context is going to vary from reading to reading. So that's kind of where I want to start by talking about this Celtic Cross reading. First of all, let's talk about when would we use the Celtic Cross reading. Well, actually, it's a good default. If you're not sure what kind of spread to use this one. It's really appropriate on a lot of levels. So you can use the Celtic Cross reading if you want to do a reading that what I call a meta reading. What's a meta reading? A meta reading is like when you just want to see where's this person at in their life at this moment. Where are they? What's up? So if somebody comes in and they just want a general reading, this is a good one. You can also use this reading and apply it to a more specific question. Am I going to meet a partner? Will this job be good for me? You can use it for those kinds of things. It's not the greatest layout for a yes or no. This afternoon we'll do a yes or no kind of reading. Because what this does is this just gives you all the influences and then you sort of have to put it together. If people come in and they want a real yes or no, probably this would not be the reading I would use. It's also not the best reading, in my opinion, for relationship questions. So if somebody's in a relationship and they're like, oh my gosh, I just don't know what to think about this relationship. I don't know if I should stay with it or if I should bail, if it's a good one or not. This is the reason why I don't like the Celtic Cross so much for that, is the Celtic Cross tells you pretty much about you. We're going to, or meaning the querent, we're querent questioner. We're going to actually look at another spread this morning that's really good if you want to look at relationships. And the reason why is I developed it having worked with this and seen the shortcomings of it for relationship readings. And the spread I'm going to show you has, here's you, here's the person you're interested in, here's what you each bring, and so on. Yeah.
When you say relationships, are you meaning basically like husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, or partner?
Could be any relationship. Could be like a mom and a child
or something.
Absolutely. So sometimes the parent comes in and they're like, oh man, I'm really having trouble with my teenage daughter. And that would be me. Except actually she's not in trouble. She's a great kid. But let's suppose, that I was really concerned about her. There are a couple ways I could go. One would be to do the Celtic cross for her, meaning like, so what's up with her? But if it was more like, am I doing the right thing here? Is all this, brouhaha going on because I'm out of whack or she's out of, what's up with us? Then I would do the relationship reading. And that would give me a really good idea of because what's interesting about relationships is that a lot of times it isn't that anybody's at fault. Right? Let's say it's me and JoJo, okay? And maybe we're having a rough patch. And, the issue isn't whether or not I'm screwed up or she's screwed up. It might just be that we're in two different places. Like maybe when I did the relationship reading, what it would show would be, this is my fear, mommy fear coming up, that, I'm too distracted by, my outside life, and she's in a place where she really needs me. Or it could show that I'm really focused on wanting to micromanage her, and she's needing to go out and push out into the world. So the problem isn't that anybody's right or wrong, it's just that those two energies don't mesh very well. And that's why the relationship spread is such a good one, because you can give people pretty concrete advice about how to negotiate the relationships that they're in. So let's go back to our Celtic Cross and start with that, because this is probably one of the most useful readings. And one of the things that I did with the Celtic Cross is when I started putting it on the board, and you see this is on the bottom of your handout, I gave you that little traditional thing that readers say. And it's kind of a nice thing. It's a little bit like a gypsy fortune teller, but oh well, we all have that little gypsy part of us, right? So, you lay your cards and you say these things as you do them. This covers you. Well, okay, you think, what do you mean by covers you? Well, first of all, and that leads me to one other little point before we do the whole thing here. There's a thing called a significator in readings. You can choose to work with or without them. I often choose to work with them. A significator means that you lay a card down before you even start the reading. You lay a card down that represents the questioner. And we call that the significator. And here's the thing that's interesting. So you have to pick a card. Typically, there are a couple different ways you can do it. What we usually do is we use court cards. And you can choose based on a couple of different parameters, and this is pretty much up to you. And you don't even have to follow any of those parameters. You can just choose a significator based on your own feeling. So, yes.
This is the reader or the querent?
The querent.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's about the querent. So the significator, so that's the card that represents them. Here are the three ways you can do it. The first is you can do it based on astrology. So, for example, I'm a Virgo, which is mutable, right? Earth. Mutable, Earth. Mutable, we know that means it's the Knights. Earth would be Pentacles, the Knight of Pentacles. You could pick that card for me if you wanted to do it astrologically. So you say to your client, what's your sign? And you grab the card that has to do with that. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is to say, what's your sign? And if it's an earth sign, you know it's going to be Pentacles. If it's an air sign, you know it's going to be Swords. If it's a water sign, you know it's going to be Cups. And if it's a, what have I forgotten, fire sign, it's going to be Wands. And then you pick according to the age and the sex. So if it was a woman, you would choose the Queen if it was a mature woman, or a Page if it was a young woman, which in some decks is the Princess, right? The Page and the Queen and the Princess, or the Queen and the Page. The other way you can do it is if it's a man, it would be King. If it's a mature man, Knight. If it's a young man. This is just another method. Or you might look at it in terms of kings and knights, and you might just base it, and queens and pages, just base it on your feel for the person. So if a person is, regardless of their age, has this youthful questing quality, you might choose a knight. And if they're more about being subtle and, like, so if it's a guy and he has that kind of fatherly, protective, head of the family kind of energy, or he's the director of a corporation or whatever, you might choose a king. Likewise with a woman, queen is that more stable, energy, and the princess is that more exploring, youthful. And people have these qualities regardless of their age. So you can do it that way. The final way you can pick is you can pick in terms of this is a very folk kind of method. What the person sort of looks like. So, for example, Earth would tend to be dark-haired, dark-eyed, maybe olive skin. And then again, you just pick a king or a queen, a page or a knight, depending on age and sex. Swords would be more like darker hair, but maybe not jet black, more like brown hair, and more like hazel or gray or blue eyes. That would be swords. Fire is easy. Redheads, reddish brown. And then for finally, that would be wands. And then finally, what am I missing? Cups, fair-haired individuals. Blonde, light, kind of lighter eyes. So that's another way of doing it. That's just a folk method. And all of them are fine. The other thing you can do is, with the Celtic Cross, often I'll do a meta reading, and something will come up in the reading that we're really interested in. Like, say, maybe the reading is skewing you toward a bunch of stuff about career, but then you have a question about it. You might choose a card, you might decide to do a second spread, and you would choose a card, a significator that has to do with that question. You could either grab one of the cards from the reading that you just did that you have a question about and make that the significator, or you could choose some card that made sense with that. Yeah.
Is your feeling that the significator affects what cards are drawn later, or do you use the significator when you're looking at the cards to just sort of affect them with a feeling?
It's a focus. I mean, and to be honest, the funny thing about tarot is you can make it work anyway. So sometimes, I don't even use a significator. Mostly I do. And the idea is the significator is like saying to the unconscious mind, this is what I'm really interested in. And then, the cards come out. And it's a focus. But it's not like, oh my God, did I get the right significator? You know what I mean? If that's the significator you picked, it's right for you.
So it sort of helps you connect with the rest of the
Exactly. Gives you a sense that, okay, this is what the energy's about. Yeah. John.
I was just wondering, could the significator be something in relation to the energy of the question that's being asked?
Yes, that's particularly true. Like, let's say a person says, I really want to know if I'm ready to go out there and start my career seriously, like they've been in a training mode. So you might choose like the Three of Pentacles, which is the card of the journeyman, right? The person who's like completed their training and now they're going to go out in the world. You might choose that as the significator. And yeah.
And also, if you put up paired the sexes, a queen with a female or a page,
right.
princess with a female, so on and so forth. What if it's cross-gender type questioning, like a female doing a male role or a male doing a female role?
You can choose any card you want. There again, the attribution of women to queens and pages is really a very traditional attribution. Right. And as we all know in these modern times, things don't always work that way. Everybody's yin and everybody's yang. So again, be flexible. If that doesn't feel right, like let's say, you're reading for a man, and this is a man who is an artist, who is deeply interested in the unconscious mind. You might choose the Queen of Cups for him. That's a good significator. So we don't have to be tied to any one thing. It's because this is really all just about focusing your energies. So whatever feels like the right card for you, you can pick. Yeah.
So with the significator, would you put it down in place of the first card, or would you put the first card on top of it?
On top. And that's why this covers you.
Okay.
Right? So the first card is you, meaning the querent. So it's sitting there, and then I'm going to take my first card. So let's see. Here's my querent, right here. I'm going to take my first card, and I'm going to go, this covers you. Right? And then I'm going to take my next card, this crosses you. And so on and so forth. We're going to follow that order. So that's why we say this covers you. Now, what do we mean by that? Now, if you look at your second little handout, this is like a really short-term kind of thing. Like this is a distillation. So this covers you. This is the card of the questioner. Now, we're going to back up. What do we mean by that? Well, first of all, look at the 3 pillars. I have this laid out on this sheet. And here they are. So here is our first pillar. This right up here. This pillar and the cards that are on this pillar have to do with the inner world of your questioner. So when I say this covers you, what I mean by that is this is what is driving the client on an internal level. And it's often not conscious. People may not be aware of that. They come in and, you know what I mean? Where, let's face it, we're all kind of unconscious sometimes in our life. So this is what, number one, this covers you. This is about what's driving the querent from a deep level. Now, if you're doing a meta reading, meaning a reading that really has to do with, you know, the whole unfolding process of the person's karma and soul and so on and so forth, what I would say is at this moment in their life, this is what's trying to emerge. This is what is crying out to be expressed or developed within the self. So this is unconscious self. Now that's opposed to the second pillar over here, which is much more about the external world. Now there's a card over here that's also about the querent, and this is number 7, and that card is this is your self. All right? Self meaning external personality. All right? So this is kind of how the person at that moment is consciously organized. It's how they're thinking about themselves. It's how they're thinking about the world. It's their conscious persona, which is very different from the inner self, you know? And sometimes the inner self isn't so clear to the client or the questioner, the querent. Whereas usually when you say, okay, this is who you are, you know, in that external sense, this is, you know, how you're thinking about things, this is usually pretty obvious. So when you say that your client's sitting there going, nodding, you know, because it's conscious. They kind of know it, you know what I mean? This should be a no-brainer. In other words, when you say, well, this is where you're at, they're going to go, oh yeah, right, yeah. Mm-hmm. Whereas this one, they may not be aware of. On the other hand, when you name it, going back to this notion of naming, when you name what's driving them from an internal level, there's that slight widening of the eyes, that slight breath that person takes when it's like, yeah. You know, they might not have been conscious of it, but when you name it, they go, yeah. There's something in them that knows that, right? So this is more the inner world, this is more the external world. And here's an example of something that is very important when you're doing a layout. You've got to be constantly cross-referencing. So the relationship between these two cards is really interesting. If the inner card, the card of the inner evolution is, let's say it's a card that's all about going inward and finding one's internal meaning. And over here, they have something like the 9 of Wands, which is a card about trudging on with like 50 million projects. Whoops. That's not such a good thing. That means that what they're focusing on consciously is not what their inner world is demanding and asking for. On the other hand, if these two cards are really closely related, so that you have, let's say, instead on the inner world, you have, now it's time, you have something like the Page of Wands. You're beginning to really get in touch with your power, and you're going to be out there expressing it in the world. That's what this time period is all about for you, is really being able to express yourself in the world. And then over here, you have a card like, say, the King of Wands, or you have, the Two of Pentacles, the Juggler. That makes sense. And you say, oh yeah, so consciously you're really getting ready to start to, keep a lot of balls in the air, and you're really interested in, and that's good, because this time period for you on an internal level is really about learning to express yourself in the world. So do you see what I mean by how you want those two cards to be on the same page? So in other words, if somebody's inner life is calling for something and what they're consciously trying to do is completely the reverse, this is not a good thing. If, on the other hand, they're consciously kind of working a piece and it's the same piece that their inner world is calling for, that's a good thing. So that's one of the first things that you're really going to look for. Right? Now, going back to, so we have these three pillars. This is more about the internal world. This is more about the external world. And then this is what I call the pillar of flux. This has to do with the intersection between the inner and the outer worlds, and how it expresses itself in terms of where the person has been and what's coming in. So let me go through that in a more systematic way. All right. Well, let me say one more thing about this middle, this cross pillar, this horizontal pillar. So what do I mean by the intersection between the inner and the outer worlds? Well, here's the thing. One of the things that I always laugh about is when people get too new agey, they're always like, you create your own reality. Whatever it is you really want, you can bring it into being. Well, at one level that's true, and at another level that's absurd. So you have to think about the fact that, yes, how you're thinking and how you're creating yourself internally gives you a certain charge that will either attract things to you or repel them. And that will help you in whatever it is you're trying to do. On the other hand, there is such a thing as external reality. So if you're all about, making $1 million and the external energy is a period of contraction economically, it's not to say that you can't have financial success. It's just saying it's going to be a lot harder, because the external energy isn't, really working with you. Another example would be a person who wants to sort of go out and create world peace. Well, the external energy is World War III, still a worthy goal, but you may be swimming upstream, right? So one of the things that this is about is this helps to bring in the fact that we do have to intersect to some degree with the energies of the world. In Hermeticism, we talk about this as riding the pendulum, right? So, we can't always control events. We can control how we respond to events. We can control how we feel about them. We can control how we think about them, and we can adapt to them in ways that are either really creative and good, or we can respond in ways that are not so helpful. But events there are big swings. So they talk about this in the I Ching a lot, but so what a wise person does is you look at the tides around you and you adjust your agenda. And here's a smaller example, because it can be big tides like, the economy, the politics of the time, what's going on in the world, or it can be a much smaller tide. It could be just the tide of, what's happening right around you in the moment. So let's say, you really want to kind of revolutionize, your workplace. You want to shake it up and bring in lots of new ideas. But the tide of the moment is one of contraction. Probably not the best time to do that. You know, you might want to wait, bide your time. So, and that's not even to say that a person should give up on whatever it is they're trying to do. It's just that they may want to give it a slightly different spin, right? You know, because, so for example, if you're in this personal expand mode, and you want to expand your business, and you really want to expand, and everything around you is contracting, maybe not the best time for big expansion, but it might be a time where you take that expansive energy to develop your products, to develop, you know, to make a stronger base for yourself, that kind of thing. So this is all about energies that are coming in and the energy that is going out. Over here on the external pillar, you have the more externalized self. This is yourself. The externalized environment. This is your house. Now, this is an important thing again when we look at the connection between the incoming energy and the environment. So when we say this is your house, what we mean is not the big tides. We mean more like the personal tide. So the personal environment. So that would include things like a person's family, their intimate relationships, including friends, children, lovers. It would include like their personal work environment. So that's a much smaller thing as opposed to the big tides. So one of the things that I'm always curious about is the way these two things interrelate. If they're on the same page, if the incoming energy and the person's environment are both positive relative to the question being asked, that's a good thing. So you can say, well, here's the good news. You know, your personal environment is going to support this new self-expression, and you've got a good energy in a much more general sense of what's going on out there in the world. Both of these things are going to help you. Sometimes you have a disjunct. You can say, well, general tides aren't so great, but you're going to get a lot of personal support. You know? Or vice versa. Well, your family and your friends are going to think that you are absolutely friggin' nuts. They're going to just go, you are crazy. On the other hand, you know what? The energy's out there. It's ready for you. Go for it. Right? So that's an interesting thing. Someone had a question over here. Yes.
6 is pretty much the bigger tides you were saying.
Yes, the bigger tides.
That are coming.
And so think about it again. If you think about the way these two things relate, you can see it. So, you know, you might have, the energy might be out there for you in the broader culture as a whole and in the broader universe as a whole, but your family and your immediate circumstances may not be supportive. And that often happens if you have a reading that's about a client needing to break free. You know what I mean? So for example, you have a person who, well, this would be me when I was younger in a funny sort of way. So when I was younger and I was in academics, and, you know, my family loved that. I mean, it was my daughter. You know, my mother could come and my daughter lectured to 60 people at the university, you know, on Godwin and the Green Knight. You know, moms love that kind of stuff. You know, and then I decided to become a healer. I'm working on people in their underwear, a little less, you know, glamorous, right? You know, it's like, well, you know, my daughter's a massage therapist. So, you know, so when I was doing readings at that time, I was getting really good reading. These cards were really in alignment. My internal, you know, world was calling for me to be a healer. There was a lot of good energy for it to happen. These cards were not very great. My number 8, my environment card, you know, my family was kind of like, you know. And that happens, you know. Thankfully that got better, but, you know, after I fixed my mother's back, she suddenly had a whole different viewpoint. So this is more like the bigger tide. And this is more like the person's personal external circumstances. And when they're all in alignment, oh, that's a beautiful thing. Then you say to somebody, hey, man, everything's going for you. Really go for it, you know? On the other hand, if everything's going for the client except for this card here, then you say, look, internally you're ready, you're thinking about it the right way, the energy's out there in the universe, you need to change your environment because, man, it is not working for you. Right? This is really great. Do you see how the flexibility this gives you in reading? It's a beautiful thing. Then up here, this is an interesting thing. This is the only card that sometimes I have a hard time wrapping my head around on this pillar, but it's what I call the card of central ambivalence. And it has to do with how the very thing that we hope for and we consciously want, we also have internal resistance to, or we have fears, things that get in our way. So this is kind of a mix. It's a little internal and external, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. And then, of course, the outcome is, how does it look when you get through the whole mess? So that's our external pillar. Our internal pillar, you really want to pay attention to the movement up, from the bottom up. So there's this drive that's happening at a deep level. Down here on the foundation card, which is this is below you, meaning it's your foundation, it's the ground under your feet. This is the energy that the person has. This is their ace in the hole. I don't care what the card is there, you know, even if it's hard to, you can't even think of a negative so much here. I mean, if you did get a negative sort of card, it would be only negative in the sense that they've had rough experiences and they've learned from them. Because this is innately, this is always their strength. This is what's below them. And what this card tells you is these are the resources that the client has to carry out what their psyche is calling for. By resources, I mean a number of different things. It could be, for example, the person's skills, innate abilities, you know, a personality trait. It could be things they've learned. It could be, you know, past karma. It could be a lot of different things. But whatever it is, it's their strength. And you, again, you want to look at these two cards and you want to look at the way these two cards interrelate, number 1 and number 4, because if you have a strength card that tells you that the person's strong suit is all about being grounded and practical and detail oriented, and what they're trying to do, what they're crying out to do is you know, to become a visionary, that's going to be a struggle for them. It doesn't mean they shouldn't do it, because what your psyche's calling for is what you really need to be getting on about. But what you might need to tell them is, you know what? This is the one way you can look at this position negatively. Your strong suits don't serve where you're going. This happens, by the way, a lot. You know, that's when your strong suit becomes your straitjacket, right? So, for example, I'll give you an example like using me. So, a lot of my life, one of my strong suits is, you know, being able to take ideas as a teacher. It's being able to take ideas out in the world. It's being able to get things happening. It's being able to manifest. Those are strong suits of mine. And if what's being called for is for me to retreat, let's say I have, you know, the hermit or something, and what's being called for is for me to go into a period of internal quiet and retreat. Actually, a really interesting card would be like, say, the 4 of Swords. Remember the knight laying on the bench with the 4 of Swords? Then my strong suits might actually not be so helpful, because they're all about being out there, being a mover and shaker. And that happens to us. And then what you have to say is, you know, you have a little struggle here, because you're trying to do something and all your strong suits are about something else. So you're going to have to go into a period where you may feel sort of feeble, because you're going to have to develop some new ways of being. Yeah.
And like we were saying, maybe even that first card is what the person says when they ask you a question from the reading isn't even going to match with that first card.
Oh yeah. A person may have, you know, this idea that they really want to hear that, you know, they're going to go out there and start a whole new business, and it turns out that, number 1, the card they have in this, you know, that covers them is all about internal life. Then you're going to have to say, well, guess what? You know, I know this is what you're thinking you really want to do, but at a deep level, that's not what's being called for here. And this happens a lot, actually. But strong suits are a funny thing because strong suits are what we're good at, and so we can keep doing the same thing, same old, same old, same old. Sometimes what our psyche wants is for us to step outside those strong suits, because then we learn something else. That's hard. And so you're going to look at that, these two things. And then you're going to also come up here to the top of the pillar, number 3. This is probably one of my biggest variations on this reading, in that what I view this card as this is, there are two things it could be. It's like the best that can be arrived at, in the sense that if you follow your own internal energy, this is what you're going to manifest. And the other way of looking at it is it's a lesson to be learned. And what I mean by that is that at any given moment in your life, we're working something. And that's a really important thing. This is one of the more important cards, in my opinion. So now we have these 3 pillars. We have more of the internal world, more of the external world, and then we have this horizontal pillar, which is kind of a mix of how the person's own personal energies and the energies of the big outside world. And so that's a kind of an interesting thing. All right, any questions about that? Everybody got that? Good. Then let's look at the individual cards, some of which we've already done a little of. Card number 1. So what I said about that is that this is the card of the querent, and it represents what's driving their evolutionary process or their interest in the matter. So sometimes you're going to have a reading that's very specific, and the person will say, I really want to know about, okay, they'll say, I'm thinking about changing careers. You know, I've been in a career for a long time, and I'm successful at it, but it's not making me happy. So I'm thinking about changing careers. Is that an insane thing to do right now in this crazy economy or not? And then you say, well, okay, let's take a look at it. And so we throw the first card. And what we get is the 6 of Swords, which is remember the picture is the woman in the boat going from there are rough waves in the background, and she's moving toward a shore in the distance with smooth waves ahead. That's a card of journey. So you say, well, yeah, your psyche really wants to take a journey here, you know? And so that would be, an example of where it's the significator, or rather the first card really backs up what it is they're thinking about doing. But you might get something that's quite the reverse. You might get something like the 4 of Pentacles. And I'd say, well, you're feeling restless right now, and you're feeling confined right now. You know, 4s are like that. But, you're not ready to move on. At an inner level, this is supposed to be a time for you to, stabilize and, because you know how we all do that. It's like, oh, I'm ready for the next thing, but you're not. You need to stay. Your psyche is calling for you to stay put. Right? So it can tell you this is about what psyche has to say as opposed to what my brilliant little mind is telling me it's going to be, And we're not always the same. So that's that's what that first card is all about. It sets the tone. It tells you this is where your drives at a deep level are about. And it's interesting too, because once again, sometimes that can tell you right away that, okay, this is what you think you're about, but that's not the case. So somebody is really wanting to work on relationships, and they get the 9 of Pentacles, which is all about independence and learning how to be happy on your own. That's in that number 1 position. You're going to kind of have to say, you know what, this is not the right time for that. But let's do the rest of the reading and find out what you really are supposed to be doing here. So it's useful in that regard. The second, so let me go back and say one more thing. So the first card, if you're just doing where I'm at, this just tells you what your psyche is calling for. if the person has a specific question, you want to pay attention to whether that first card is going to support that goal or not. So if they want to move and they have a card of hunkering down and stability, you right from the get-go, you know that they're not on the right track. If they want to like stay put and put down roots and they get the Fool, well, you know, hello, I don't think that's probably too good. So you really want to read this first card. If there is a specific question, you want to read it within the context of that. Yeah.
So you're saying that first card, all the other cards
Elaborate.
are an unfolding of that particular card.
Exactly. Because we hope. Because this is what psyche is calling for. This is what, at a deep level, your being is calling for. This is the internal drive. And that's what's so funny, because often what we think we want over here is not in congruence with that internal drive, and it never works. Because you know how it is? Have you ever tried to do that? You know, you make yourself move, you make up your mind about something and you're gonna just follow through with it, but it really isn't what your internal being wants. And so you will sabotage yourself 6 ways to Sunday. It's just pathetic. You just shoot yourself in the foot at every possible turn. You know? Bam! Okay. Now I'm limping. Right? So that's our first card. The one card I didn't talk about is the obstacle card. Number 2. Obstacle card is really tricky. And one of the reasons why it's tricky is, look, it's the intersection of these 2 pillars. All right? So the obstacle card could be one of 2 things or a blend of them. The first is, it could really be about the external, about the energies of the big picture. So, and that would put it in this horizontal plane. So it could be like the person is trying to do something and they're pushing the river. So they have the obstacle card indicates that there's like the time isn't right, or maybe, you know, there's just a lot of external problems that they have to overcome. By no means does the obstacle card mean that the person shouldn't move forward, because everybody has an obstacle. But it can tell you a lot about where the problems are going to be. And that's one of the things that I say is that, okay, so what this card here, this obstacle card is about is this is where you're most likely to you know, encounter snags, right? So the obstacle card could be about this more, the external energies. Or the obstacle card could be more about this first pillar, and it could be more about what's inside the querent that they're going to have to overcome. So let's say you have, you know, number 1, our psyche card is all about, you know, self-expression. We'll go back to that earlier model of, say, the Page of Wands. I want to begin to flex my muscles a little. I want to begin to establish my power in the world. And I have, as a crossing card, I have a card of shyness. Well, that's an internal quality that the person's going to have to struggle with. And so you're going to say, well, this is the time for you to begin to, you know, express yourself more in the outer world. And the thing that you're going to be, you know, struggling with is that you're a little shy. So, you know, maybe go take a couple seminars and, you know, how to overcome internal shyness, or, you know what I mean? So you just say that's going to be an obstacle. Or maybe the internal energy is about really wanting to become more organized and to become more, so be something like the Queen of Swords. You know, you want to get rid of extraneous stuff. You want to get rid of stuff that's no longer meaningful in your life. You want to sharpen your focus. And then you have the 7 of Cups, which is, remember, that's where you're looking and you see all the different cups in the clouds with the various things in them. And it's like, well, you may want to focus, but you're going to have to struggle with the fact that you're always interested in everything out there. That would be me. So, you know, there's like, well, I could do that, or I could do that, or ooh, that looks like fun. Ooh, boy, you know. So I'm like, I'm going to be really focused here, and then I sign up for 3 new activities, you know. So, right? So it could be that. It could be something internal, it could be something external, and sometimes it's a combination of the two. One of the things that you want to look for, though, on the second card, your obstacle card, is, first of all, if you get a trump, if you get a major arcana, that's a big obstacle. Probably an indication that they're working on a big lesson. And so when you see that trump here in the obstacle position, pay particular attention to the lesson card number 3, because you can bet it's a big one. If somebody gets a lesser arcana card, not such a big deal, something they just have to work with. It's more of a detail as opposed to a major psychological thing, right? The other thing that you want to pay attention to when you're looking at that obstacle card is, once again, how does it relate to the other cards? So, for example, if my obstacle card is really wildly different than my strength card, then and what would be an example of that? Let's say my strength card is the Knight of Pentacles. You remember the guy on the big horse, and it's the Percheron, that guy's gonna get somewhere. He's slow but steady, wins the race. Okay, so that's our strength. And you have as your obstacle card the Knight of Swords, the guy who's streaking across the horizon. Then one of the things you want to say is, you're having an impulse here that you really want to move fast, but that's not your strong suit. And that might be interpreted one of two ways. So you could say, okay, you need to move fast here. You're in a time of rapid change, and the obstacle is that it's not your strong suit. It's going to be hard for you to do that. Or you might look at it the other way. Slow down. Slow down. And how would you make a decision between those two things? Probably pay attention to what's going on here and here. So if the incoming card indicates rapid change in movement, and you have the King of Swords over here, then that's in agreement. Then you could say, okay, you need to move fast. Things are moving fast in the outer world. You've got, a need to move fast, and your struggle is going to be that it's not in consonance with your strong suit. This is not an easy thing for you to do. Yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to frame my ideas about the middle pillar.
Right.
Are the cards that come out what they want to come out, or is it what's coming out, just like burgeoning out from what the universe says?
Yeah, the cards are what is.
What is, like.
What is. So we have our ideas about what we think and what we want, and then there's what is. This is what is. It's the what is of the querent and the what is of the universe. It's both. The middle pillar is more about the querent, right? This is more about the world. So, well, actually, this is more about the world. And this is a mix, right? But it's external, more external. Is that helping?
Yeah.
All right. So, again, the obstacle card is tricky. We'll play with that. All right, let's look at number 3. The number 3 card represents either the best that can be hoped for if the person really works the energies. So in other words, if Psyche is wanting you to deepen, and you have a card of like the Queen of Cups sitting up there in your lesson, then you can say, well, if you really follow this energy, you're going to become a real visionary, right? And on the other hand, you might have a card, if Psyche's calling for deepening and you have a very external card up here, then you might say, well, you're going to get somewhere, but it's probably not where your Psyche is directing you. But the other thing you want to pay attention to up there about that position is it has to do with the lesson to be learned. And a lesson to be learned means what is it really that we're working on in this life at this time? And here again, you want to look at how these three things fit. If the foundation card is a card of stability, the lesson to be learned is, to really maximize what is. That's, and Psyche is calling for, a deepening of one's existing system. That's a nice flow right up the tree. If they're wildly different, that's a problem. Yeah.
So it's kind of like a futuristic card as well. It's a snapshot of what the person's going to feel like, or
It's it's more about that would be over here actually in your outcome. This is more like, what can I learn? So, for example, sometimes people have some heavy readings, with a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. But then, you can look up at that lesson card and say, and especially if it's Trump, and you can say, well, this is not an easy reading, but boy, you're going to come out of this with a big piece of understanding, or a big change. That would be two ways of reading it. So it's a lot about the lesson, and there again, you want to pay attention to these three things. Like, how does the lesson relate to the psyche? What psyche is pushing for, And that's what's interesting about that is, from psychological perspective, what that tells us is there is an inner drive, an inner motivation that's pushing me in a certain direction, and this is where it can get me. Right?
So you're relating cards 1 and 2 to the psyche?
Well, everything relates to the psyche. Number 1, though, is what on a deep level is psyche calling for. Psyche is your soul. It's you in the context of your whole life's journey, right? So what we're looking at here is, what am I going to get out of this particular time or this particular energy that I'm working with at the moment? What am I going to learn from it? Could be a big thing, could be a little thing. But there again, you want to pay attention to how these guys interrelate. So you want to look at the flow of energy up the tree on that pillar. Does that make sense? All right. If it doesn't, let me know. Yeah, Susie.
Well, so that all the cards are going to tell you how the number 1 is going to unfold.
Right.
And the lesson is almost an inevitable. That's almost like your karma.
Yeah, it
The
is.
3
It
your
is
karma.
a card of karma, but one can achieve it or not.
Oh, okay. That's what I was wondering, how inevitable.
Yeah,
that was.
it's not inevitable. It's the best. In other words, if you really work it, there's your lesson, there's your karma. That's what you get out of it. On the other hand, you may not achieve it because you may just keep ignoring what it is you're supposed to be doing. And you know what I'm saying? If you work at cross purposes, then you're going to have to go through another. It's like relationships. Think about this for a minute, okay? So when somebody, let me give it. Let's see if I can do this in a card thing. So let's say Psyche is looking for the person is looking for how to really understand themselves and expand themselves in the realm of relationships, and they get the Lovers right here in number 1. So Lovers, I don't want to encourage you to think of that always as a romantic card, but it is an alchemical card about learning through the other, right? And so, that's your psyche. You really want to learn through the other. Now, you could have a bunch of stuff like over here in the self, you could have the person being focused on power issues, like being the Queen of Wands. Probably not the best thing if you're looking for the alchemical marriage, right? And then you have in the environment, you might have, say, the 7 of Pentacles, where everybody's beating each other over the head with wands. Well, the environment isn't so hot either. In other words, this person is being called to develop themselves in relationship, and they're in a contentious, controlling place. And then your outcome card might be the 2 of Cups, really beginning to understand relationships. So here's what happens in the real world. You go through a relationship and you learn something, and then when you go into your next relationship, you do better, or you don't. If you don't, learn in the relationship, you go into your next relationship and you do the same darn thing. And so that lesson card might not change until you figure it out, right? So that's what we hope that the person gets. But do they get it? Depends on whether or not they work the energies. If they work the energies of the reading, they get it. If they don't, they're going to have to come back and do it again. It's like life, right? So you either get it or you don't. And so that's an interesting thing. Yes, John.
So, you say if you either get it or you don't, wouldn't that be kind of a determinant card, except if you have to, you would have to work through that card to get more out of the reading?
Well, this is not, this doesn't tell you whether they're going to get it or not. This tells you what they will get if they really do their work. Right, it's if they do their work. That's what you're going to get out of it. And that's an important thing to focus on, because, you know, a lot of times when you have a reading that indicates a lot of difficulty, you know, a lot of pain and a lot of suffering, and we do get them. It's not fun to read. You know, but you might have a really beautiful card up here, which is like, let's say a person is going through, okay, let's say number 1 is the Tower. Oh boy. So, a lot of things are flying apart. But what we have up here on number 3 is the 2 of Wands. Well, what that tells me is, okay, everything's falling apart. You know, your structures aren't big enough to hold your psyche anymore. It's really chaotic. And then the rest of the reading, there's a lot of cards of chaos and how to overcome chaos and whatever. And I'll say, okay, this is going to be like a really dicey, wild, chaotic time. But if you work it, you're going to end up in a new place, ready to move out into the world with a whole new phase. Let's say you have a reading that indicates the person's exiting a relationship. That happens. It's like time to leave behind that toxic environment that you're in. And then you have the lesson card up here is the Lovers or the 2 of Cups. What you can say is, there's the carrot. If you do this work, if you leave this toxic relationship, you can actually get to a real relationship. You know, or you're going to reach a place where you have a whole new emotional beginning. So I think what's important about number 3 is that 2 things. It really tells us where the area of learning is, and it also gives them hope. So that's an important card. One thing that I like to look at is the relationship between number 3 and number 9. Number 9, which is over here, represents their hopes and fears. So if what it is they're really yearning for is an agreement with number 3, our lesson card, that's good. That's good. If they're wildly divergent, then I'm saying, you know, I know this is what you really want and what you're really hoping for, but you know what? That's really not what you need right now. So number 3 is a lot about what the person really needs to learn. So number 4 down here is their strong suits. What can help them achieve what Psyche is going for? And number 3 is what Psyche's really reaching for. Yeah.
How would you interpret it if number 3 came up as a card that you would see as generally negative, like the Tower or the Devil?
Okay. Well, first of all, there is no negative.
I mean,
But
you
I know what you
understand
say. I know what you mean. It's that's actually an interesting question, because let's say the Devil card comes up here. Well, that's where I would actually read that card in its positive sense. So I would say, you know what? Here's your possible lesson. You can overcome your addictive tendencies. You can actually liberate yourself from your addictive tendencies. But that's the lesson. And that would be a great example of where sometimes that's a really, really important card, this number 3, because if that Devil comes up in number 3 and the person's like all about relationships, then one of the things that I may say is, you know what? You're not going to be able to achieve your relationship goals until you overcome your addictive tendencies in relationships. That's the lesson, right? Or the Tower, what I'd say is, okay, so, you know, what you're really going for is, you know, you want to have this sweet little happy relationship where you get to settle down and get taken care of, and you know, he goes out and makes $1,000,000 and you get to bake bread and raise kids. But you had the Tower up here as your lesson. You know what? That idea is not big enough for you. Too small. That's the lesson. It's a beautiful, beautiful position. You see what I mean? How it really expands, you know, the whole picture. This is why I like this, by the way, as a meta reading. Because, and often if people are not attached to having a particular question, I often like to start with a meta reading. You know, and then if they still want to know about, after you've told them what's really going on in their life and their personal karma and all that, if they really still want to know about whether or not they're going to get Jack Jones, then you can always do a second throw. But you'll have a whole background to put it against, right? So that's a beautiful thing. So that's our first pillar. And that's cards 1, 2, 3, 4. Does everybody get that? Are there any questions about that? Yeah. Susie.
This has to do with a situation. It's not a general life.
Could be.
Life outcome.
Could be either. Could be either. I don't usually read for a life outcome in the sense that, you know, it's too big. It's too big. Well, although you could. I mean, but the reason why, here's why I wouldn't read for a life outcome. It's too deterministic. You know, where we're going to get in a given life depends on what we put into it. It's like when you show up for a class, okay? What's your outcome in that class? Well, the class has particular objectives, which hopefully you'll meet, or maybe you won't if you don't do it. But you might put a lot of work into a class, and you not only achieve the objectives of the class, you achieve a bunch of other stuff as well. Or you might not put any work into it, in which case you come out of it and it was kind of a non-event. And that's how life is. We get what we put into it. And even if we make really unbelievable mistakes, those unbelievable mistakes can be fabulous. Boy, do we learn from our mistakes. You know? Actually, we learn more from our mistakes, I think, than we learn from our successes. You know? Successes just mean that you're cashing in on what's already a strong suit a lot of the time, or you're lucky. I want you guys to get in pairs. So if you're on a threesome, you know, one of you turn, like you two on the end, and I want you to each, you're just going to throw only this pillar. So you can say to you can ask a question, your person can have a question or not. You're going to have just a short time for each of you, like 5 minutes or so a piece, okay? And what I want you to do is have your question, or it can be open-ended, like just where am I right now? And your partner is going to throw that pillar. And then see what you get from it. And if you get stuck, stick your hand up and I'll wander over and we'll look at it. And if somebody has a really brilliantly confusing one, that'll be even great. We'll use it as an example when we come back together. So we're going to have 10 minutes. So go. All right, everybody, come back. So I just kind of grabbed a couple of readings just so you could see a couple of different things. Is this coming together for you guys? All right. So here's a reading that we had. Okay, I'm going to have to erase this for a moment. I love my new chalk. I love my new chalk. Card number 1. It's the Page of Swords. Card number 2. Ten of Swords. Three. Knight of Swords. All right, what do you see, guys?
Swords.
Lots of swords. This is what this guy's thinking. This is about thought, all right? And down here are lone variation, 10 of Pentacles. Now there's an interesting thing here. Does anybody see the relationship?
Well, there's a couple of tens as well.
That's true. And 10s are what?
Completion.
Completion. Okay, so here's an interesting thing. We have a 10, which is about completion as his strong suit or as his foundation, and we have a 10 as an obstacle. The card reading is about swords. So here's one of the things that first really got interesting to me. So one of the ways that I looked at this, let's think about what this means. Page of Swords. Okay, page holding a sword upright. Pages are about beginnings. So what this is about is his psyche says beginnings of what? Well, it's the mind. It's the application of thought. So he's getting ready to go out there and manifest his own thought. And that's what his psyche wants to do, is get out there and start doing something with that sword. Down here, he has the 10 of Pentacles. The 10 of Pentacles is about the happy home, everything's in place. So if you want to go out there and start using the system that you've learned, and you have a strong suit of the 10 of Pentacles, what does that tell us? It tells us he's got everything in place. But what's his obstacle? The 10 of Swords. That's that card of the guy laying on the ground with all the swords on his back. And it's like, he can't believe he's really done. He hasn't done enough. He has to study some more. Maybe he has to take another exam or another workshop or another course. Right? That's his obstacle. He never feels complete. I don't know enough. I don't know enough. I don't know enough. Right?
Or could it be like all the stuff that he knows is like not gonna serve him?
Well, I don't think so, because look at what he's got up here as his lesson. The Knight of Swords, the guy streaking off across the horizon. Get off the mark already. Go, go, go. It's like, this is the picture of somebody who's, it's get ready, get set, and go. And he's on get set, get set, get set, get set, get set. What's the Knight of Swords telling him? Go. Go already, go. What's the page about? I'm ready. I'm going to start using it. You see it? It's a beautiful, beautiful sequence. Yeah, Susie.
Is it also that the 10 indicates that it's going to change?
Well, this is our...
It's about ready to go change into something else.
Yeah, right. It could. Which would be, if it did change, what would it be? Well, if we think about the Kabbalah, fire, water, air, earth. Earth then becomes fire, the spark. Yeah. But this is in his foundation, so this just tells me he's complete. And that's why I took the 10 of Swords as being stuck, right? Because if he's complete, but here we are, and he's worrying that he's not. You know what I mean? He can't let go. Yeah.
What's the sequence of transition between suit to suit again?
It's a Kabbalistic Yod-Vode. Fire, water, air, earth, and then you cycle back up.
Fire, water, air, earth?
Right.
Okay.
Fire, the primordial spark, inseminates water, the primordial void, gives birth to air, which manifests as earth. Earth, air, and that's Yod, He, which would be Yod, He, Va, air, He final. So it's fire. Let's use our Hermetic symbols: fire, water, air, earth.
You said primordial spark inseminates primordial void,
Void.
which gives birth to,
Air. Air.
well,
Mind.
mind. Okay, mind.
Which manifests as earth. Another way of thinking about it is energy inseminates water, which is potential, which gives birth to mind, a plan. which manifests as a thing. Yod-Heh-Vod-Heh. Yod-Heh-Vod-Heh. Very important to understand that. It's the tetragrammaton. It's the holy word of creation. Yod-Heh-Vod-Heh. Or Yehiya. Alright. That was a good one. I like that one. Alright, let me show you one other one and then we'll move on. Woo-hoo. Alright. And let me give this back to you guys before I want to pass those to Connie. Alright. Ugh. Here's our second one. Oh, this is a beautiful one. All right, so card number 1 is the 6 of Pentacles. Our obstacle card, card number 2, King of Pentacles. Card number 3, up here, Page of Swords. Our foundation card number 4 would be 8 of Swords. Just to give you a quick visual. So, the 6 of Pentacles is the card that has the merchant on it with the scales and he's giving alms to the poor, right? The King of Pentacles, well, King of Pentacles. The 8 of Swords is the one with the woman who's bound and blindfolded, surrounded by swords. And again, the Page of Swords is the Page of Swords. Pretty easy. All right. So, first of all, if we look at this, we have a couple of swords. We have the lesson as a sword, and we have the strong suit as a sword. So that probably tells us that a lot of this is about mental stuff. All right, well, let me just start. So let's start in the center with the 6 of Pentacles. So Psyche here is interested in this person's learning to find a balance. 6s are usually about balance and harmony between giving and receiving. And this is about the material. So this would affect a lot of things. It could be giving and receiving in the sense of charity and finances. It could be giving and receiving in the sense of the home. So, and if it's a woman, not always, but it's a good bet that it might have, and if it's a woman who has a family, it's a good bet that it probably has to do with how she's utilizing herself within the family. You know, and now this is a gross generalization, you guys. That's assuming that, you know, women have a tendency to be caretakers. Well, we're not always. And sometimes men are big caretakers. But that would be something I would immediately think about. Is it about caretaking? Right? Could also be about financial resources. If you have somebody who like me, who tends to give away the farm, might be about that. Right? But we know it's about giving and receiving. Now it's crossed by the King of Pentacles. 2 ways you could read this card. Once again, it's very tempting to read it as, if it's a woman, it's tempting. And that doesn't mean you should do it, but it's tempting to read it as a significant other. If your issue is around caretaking, but I can tell you this, you can think about it as just the powers that be. It's in the same realm, Pentacles. It's probably about family, in this case. And it may be, the obstacle may be about the fact that when you stop giving inordinately, others are not happy. And when the king ain't happy, nobody's happy. So it could be a significant other, could be the family, and it could even be your boss. The King of Pentacles is, after all, the card of the businessman. So it could also be your boss. So you finally go in there. In fact, I had a conversation last night, perfect reflection. A woman, PhD mathematician, teaches at a college, you know, and of course everything's contracting and everybody has to do more. And she's like being asked to do 70 hours a week. And this is a woman who gives 120% in every class. You know, if a student's having a hard time, she takes extra hours. Well, she's crashing and burning, you know. So she goes to her boss and goes, I can't do this anymore. I need to go part-time. And he's like, well, you can't do that because we have a hiring freeze on and I can't replace you, so you have to stay. Like this, and she's like, you don't get it. I'm falling over here, you know? So the idea being that, you know, you go into work and you say, no, I can't work 70 hours a day. Well, they may not like it. What do we have down here on the bottom is we have the 8 of Swords, and what do we have on the top? The Page of Swords. So we know that the lesson has to do with mind and discrimination and being able to make tough choices. So the Page of Swords is like, you know, if she hangs in there, she's going to be able to really arrive at a new kind of balance. And I love this because the Page of Swords is holding the sword up aloft, and there's the sense of it's about feeling a balance in the air and in the currents and being able to discriminate and say, no, this is right, no, this is not, no, yes, no. So that's where she could go. And then at the bottom we have the 8 of Swords, which is interesting. This is in her strong suits, but then we're also looking at, that's a card of being bound up in the strong suit. So what it tells me is it's interesting. Here's a woman surrounded by swords, but she's bound and she's blindfolded. So she has the potential to make the discrimination. She has the potential within her to know what's really the right thing or not. But she has to free it up. She has to free it up. Great little sequence, isn't it? Anybody have any comments about what they did or what came up for them? Anybody have any troubles? Good. All right, let's move on. All right, let me press this back.
I
Okay.
just have one question. Both
Yeah.
of us, maybe it was just the way we shuffled the cards, which we shuffled
You
them.
got a lot of trumps?
Had a lot of chumps.
Trumps mean big things. Means that you're at a time of big time. And actually, that would make sense. I think probably for both of you. You're both moving out, you know, into a whole new realm. So when you get it, trumps are harder. They're harder to read because they're big cards. And one of the things you want to look at there is how the trumps interrelate, you know. So, for example, I'm trying to remember which of the two of you it was, but one of you had, it was you. He was reading for you, and you had the Sun card as your number 1 card, and you were crossed by the Hermit. That's a great example of where you have a card that indicates, woohoo, outward expression, world, here I am, the Sun, crossed by the Hermit, which is a very inward kind of card. You know, so, and Hermit is also about shedding one's light in this kind of quiet way, you know, outside, you know, the walled town. The Hermit isn't trumpeting his or her knowledge. They exist outside the walled city, and the people, and they just trust that whoever needs them will find them. But that's an obstacle for you now. Why? You need to let your light shine a little brighter. It's the sun. It's time for you to go out there and make some noise. You've been in the background quietly doing all this great stuff for a long time, and now it's time for you to woo-hoo. So that's part of what I would read in that. Time for you to kind of go and, you know, be a little more out there. You know, you have good stuff to bring to the world. What was the bottom card?
Ace of Pentacles.
Ace of Pentacles. You have tremendous potential. You know? Now you got to bring it through this self-expression. You got to be willing to let yourself take the risk to be out there and say, I know something. And what's the top card?
Wheel of Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune. You will be fulfilling your destiny. Right?
I guess.
Right. And that's a big, big card. And there may be ups and downs to it. Sometimes you'll get hurt and everybody will be applauding you and God, you're a genius, Susie, how great. And other times everybody's going to be like, what was that? You know, and you have to be able to ride that and ignore it. If this is about, her strong suit is she's got it. She's got an ace in the hole. That's the hole, right? You got an ace in the hole, Susie. What else do you need? What else do you need? Right? When you get an ace in the hole, it's like, hello. That's a strong suit. right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in other words, you need to let it fly a little more. Stop being the one behind the scenes. Go out there and be the mover and shaker. That's what you're being called to do. Now let's do the two outer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So now we get to, this is behind you, this is before you. These two cards. And remember, we're going to pay attention again to the stream across. So 5, 2, 6. We're going to pay attention to how it interrelates to the obstacle, right? And so here we go. What is behind you? Well, this is the energy of the past. But it may be something that the person is still feeling, and often they are, but it's kind of going, you know what I mean? It's like on its way out. So often what I'll say when I look at this card is I'll say, well, this is behind you in the sense that this is really kind of what you're leaving behind, but you're probably still feeling its energy right now. But what I can tell you is, and especially if you get a negative card here, like say, I don't know, the 7 of Wands or the 5 of Wands, God forbid, where there's a lot of, or the Tower or something else, let's say it's the Tower, that's a good one. So you've been feeling really chaotic. A lot of your systems have been in breakdown. The good news is, guess what? You're leaving that behind. And it's what the person's moving away for or has completed. And this often includes bigger meta issues. So it can also be, it can be what they've been working on personally, but it can also be just the general energy. So, for example, let's suppose somebody has got the 5 of Wands. You can say, well, this has been a turbulent period for you. It's probably, and if it's been like, say, the last year, you can say, well, this has been a turbulent period for everybody. A lot of struggle involved. And you're coming out of it now. And then what they're moving into is the incoming energy, for good or ill. This includes the energy of the greater world, again. So it's not just their personal energy. You want to be thinking about what's going on in the greater world. And that's particularly true if you get a Trump. So, and again, Trumps in this middle plane indicate that there's a lot of energy around whatever it is they're working on, which is kind of interesting because sometimes you'll have not so much going on in the center pillar, maybe just like lesser energies, but you have a big cross pillar. And what that tells you is like, well, the person themselves may be really stable. There may not be a lot of change on the inner level, but they're having to ride the tides of everything else. So let's give you an example of what that might look like. So maybe you might have something like, the 8 of Pentacles as card number 1, which is a card of, working away kind of steadily. And down here you might have, the King of Pentacles. On the material, physical plane, things are pretty stable, pretty in place. The lesson, though, might be the 2 of Pentacles, the juggler. So the person's having to juggle. And then you might see what they're juggling right here on this cross plane. So you might see, like, for example, the 5 of Pentacles over here, economic hardship. The obstacle might be something in like death, big change happening. And the incoming influence might be good or bad. It might be a card that indicated things are finally settling down, or it might be a card that indicates, whoa, things are still going on, there's still some struggles out there. So it could be for example, the card that we were just looking at, the Six of Pentacles, which would say, okay, you know, there's been a lot of chaos, there's been a lot of poverty in the past, there's been a lot of economic constriction, and now the incoming energy is you're going to be okay. You're the merchant, right? It's the six, but you're going to have to watch your balance, right? You're going to have to watch your balance. Don't spend too much. This is not a great time for, you know, buying a new condo or whatever. So you're going to kind of look at that, and you want to pay attention to how these fit with the first card, in the sense that if the first card is indicating driving the person in a particular direction and the influences are not favorable for that direction. So if you have something like Susie's card where she had the Sun card as number one, and then you had, like, in the incoming energies, you had these really interior cards, like the Nine of Swords, say, you'd say, wow, well, your psyche really wants to express itself, but you have a lot of anxious energy coming in. So that's going to be a little hard because, you know, your people may not receive you as fully as one would like, because they're all going to be like, ah! You know, that's the Nine of Swords, that ah card. So, you know, so I would say that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but just be aware that there's a lot of anxiety and angst out there in the world.
Not being generated by you, but that's an exterior.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's like more like the tide of time, the times, right? And so you'd pay attention to that. So that's kind of what that pillar is about. Now let's go to our final pillar, and then we'll see if we can do some readings. So our final pillar, which is more about the external world, I think I explained this pretty well, but let me just reiterate. Number 7, the self. The self is a little different from psyche. Psyche is what, you know, is unfolding in you. It's what wants to grow. The self is more like our consciousness. It's what we think about things. It's what we consciously know. It's also our persona, how we present ourselves to the world. So let's say, for example, that somebody has right here on card number 1, the Fool, which is the card of, you know, allowing oneself to just, you know, be out there. And then they have over here, for the self, they have a real buttoned down, you know, hardcore, practical, detail-oriented card. Their persona is going to suffer a little when that Fool energy kicks in, right? So what would be a great example of that? Okay, the Queen of Swords. There she is, you know, miss off with their heads, you know, oh, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire, and you have the Fool. Oh, vey, that's not going to be easy. You know, because your persona wants to be hardcore, practical, discriminating, and the Fool is all about whatever. That would not be pleasant. That would be an example of where the inner and the outer are not in consonance. Or like with Susie's card where we had the Sun. So if you have the Sun there, and then over there in your own, you know, personal thing, you have like the 8 of Swords, the woman surrounded by swords. Well, you know, that's an indication that, you know, there you are really ready to blossom and to express yourself in the world, and your own way of thinking about yourself is disempowered. That's a difficult aspect, right? On the other hand, if we continued with her reading and she had the Sun as card number 1, and she had, let's say, what would be a really interesting card to have over there for number 7? The 6 of, what's the kid on, okay, the child on the horse is the Sun card itself. Maybe the 6 of Wands, which is a card of victory. The victor riding in the procession with the, so there is a sense of, that would be a sense of where her external thinking about things was rather optimistic, rather upbeat. That would be a good combination. We would like that. So one of the big things you want to look at when you look at number 7, that card of self, is you want to see, how does it fit with psyche? Is it in agreement? Is it not? You know? The other thing you can look for is how does it fit with the incoming energy and number 8, which is the environment. Because if they're wildly different, then the person may not have a very accurate take on, what they're thinking about may not fit with what's actually around them. So, for example, if I had a card like the Wheel of Fortune down there on number 7. So I'm on a roll, literally. I'm feeling lucky. I'm feeling like my moment of destiny has arrived. And number 6, the incoming influence is like the 8 of Swords or the 9 of Swords. Oh boy. That's not so great. And then if I had in my environment, on top of that, I had like, say, the 5 of Pentacles, which is like, not a lot of resources. So I'm thinking that this is going to be my big moment, but I have no support in my personal environment and the incoming energy is crappy. Maybe I need to revise my thinking, right? Number 8, which is, this is the card, the house. So we say, this is your house. By house, we mean the immediate personal circumstances as opposed to the broader personal circumstances. So one's significant others, one's family, one's friends, one's job, your environment. And you want to see whether or not that is in support of the querent or not. If it's not, you want to look to see whether or not there are also indications that the querent needs to move away from that environment. Because sometimes our environment doesn't support us and it means we should just like pack up our marbles and move to another game. And other times our environment doesn't support us, but maybe that's just because it's not the right time for us to be doing stuff. So this is where you want to weigh this in closely with the other factors. So it's kind of like adding up all the factors. So if the client really wants to do something, but you have a crummy environment, a crummy, incoming influence, that's a lot. And if those two things are in agreement with the obstacle, that's a lot weighted against you. You'd have to look at that carefully. Doesn't mean that the person shouldn't do it, but it would give me pause. It would really give me pause. Okay, number 9. This is one of my favorite cards, actually. And it's also, I think, the hardest card to read in some ways. I mean, it's a card of tremendous subtlety because it's a yes and no kind of card. It's a card about, this is what I call the person's central ambivalence. So the person always has a dream or a yearning or a wish. And that is probably, if you're trying to figure out what that is, take another close look at Psyche, at that number 1 card. That usually will give you a good sense of what the hope or the wish is. And the other card you'd want to look at is number 7, the card of self. And if the hope or the dream or the wish or the yearning is more in consonance with number 7, the self, but is not like Psyche, number 1, well, then what we have is a problem. The person's really jonesing after whatever it is they think is the right thing, but their psyche is not in agreement. If, on the other hand, the hope or the wish is in close consonance with what Psyche is pushing for, that's probably a good thing. That means the person's sort of on the right track. And again, look at the hope in the context of cards number 1, the Psyche, card number 7, the self, and card number 3, the lesson. That's important. But then there's also the fear. The fear is just a way of saying, what's the person resisting? It could be a couple things. It could just simply be that they're a little bit hopeless about whether or not they can ever attain what it is that they want. They may not believe that they can. So it may be an issue of belief. It could also, however, be that they have an internal resistance. They really want something, but there is another part of them that is sabotaging it. An example of that would be, let's see. So if you have a wish that is in close agreement with your psyche, but you have a big disparity between how the person's thinking about stuff, you might find the fear there. So they're at a deep level, they really want something, but consciously they can't believe in it, and so they shoot themselves in the foot. That's important to understand. Does that make sense to everybody? We'll throw these in a minute, and then you're going to start to see these issues come up. 10 is your outcome. Outcome. Well, one of the things you want to do is, again, you have a couple choices. If the outcome is immediately apparent to you, throw that card and be done. If it isn't immediately apparent to you and you feel like, whoa, I'm not sure what that means, throw a second card and hopefully you'll get a trump. If you don't, you can even throw a third card. If you've thrown 3 cards, you don't get a trump, you're done. You got to look at it and figure it. Sometimes when you throw 3 cards, though, it's interesting because it'll give you 3 stages. So let's say you have a reading that's all about a person's going out in the world and taking on career and beginning to make their mark, and then the outcome card is the 9 of Wands, which is, remember the guy carrying all the staves? And then you think, ugh, I don't know about that. And then you throw the second card and it's the Empress. Well, there's an interesting combination. So they're out there and you're going to say, well, you're going to get to a place where you're going to have a lot of projects. You will have taken on a lot. And it may feel really overwhelming and kind of hard for you. But here's the Empress. You're going to be enormously productive. The complicated thing for you is that in all that productivity that you don't get to be like a squirrel in a wheel, You don't want to get so lost in just doing that you forget, who you are. That's how I would read that.